So Maxx Crosby said something to Patrick Mahomes at the end of the game, and some people are holding his comments against him and saying, why would you say that as a Las Vegas Raiders player to our divisional rival? Plus, there's some updates with some of the Pro Bowl voting, and Brock Bowers is apparently the best tight end in the NFL. We're going to talk about that, and then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the draft order because there is an update. But let's just get right into it. So the Raiders obviously lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. And at the end of that game, Maxx Crosby was caught on a hot mic talking to Patrick Mahomes, in which he said something interesting. I want you guys to listen to this. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Don't get another one, brother.
So there you guys have it, right? Patrick Mahomes, Maxx Crosby shake hands, and Crosby mentions to Patrick Mahomes to essentially go get another one, brother. And people are saying, why would Maxx Crosby want Patrick Mahomes to go win another Super Bowl? And I totally agree with that, right? I definitely don't want the Kansas City Chiefs to go out there and win another Super Bowl. But with Maxx Crosby telling Patrick Mahomes, go get another one, brother, I don't have an issue with the actual words and actually telling Patrick Mahomes to go get another one. To me, it's really not a big deal, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't know what Patrick Mahomes and Maxx Crosby's relationship is like, right? Like, we don't know how often these guys are talking, or if they do talk or if they don't talk. We don't know the relationship, right? And again, I understand that from our perspective, we're diehard Raider fans. We don't want to see the Chiefs winning Super Bowls. But we got to recognize Maxx Crosby's not a diehard Raider fan, right? And, he'll always love the Raiders, but he's not a diehard Raiders fan. So it's a little bit different for him, and he has that personal relationship with Patrick Mahomes. At the same time, we got to be realistic too. Some players will say certain things to certain guys based off the relationships that they have, and it's really not a big deal, right? We got to be realistic with that. It's really not that big of a deal. But I did see a lot of people talking about this on social media. Some people are criticizing Max, and he's not a real Raider. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's really not that big of a deal, but it is what it is. Let's talk a little bit about Brock Bowers a little bit. Brock Bowers is having a monster rookie season up to this point. Some people are already saying Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the NFL. And I actually agree with it. I think Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the NFL. And I did not think that you could actually have a tight end come into the NFL and have the type of impact Brock Bowers is. When you say that a player is a generational player, I feel like oftentimes those labels are just being labeled on players, and it's usually not true. I guess labeled on player X, Y, and it's really not true. Like, guy's just kind of a good football player. But when Brock Bowers gets labeled generational player, there's a legit generational player there with Brock Bowers. Right? The way this guy runs routes, the way this guy can create separation, the way he's able to high point the pass or be able to flash late hands, and the intelligence of Brock Bowers, being able to get out there and create that separation. It's special, man. It really, really is special with Brock Bowers, and I think the Raiders truly do have the best tight end in the NFL. I think George Kittle is probably right there as well, but to me, this guy's different, and you can see it. Like, statistically, he's dominating. You can see it on tape. You guys put the tape on. Against the Chiefs, he had 140 yards. To me, Brock Bowers is an absolute superstar, and the Pro Bowl votes is kind of backing that up. I think when the All-Pro lists come out, that'll also probably back this up as well. I would find it hard to believe that Brock Bowers is not a first-team All-Pro. And truth be told, I think this guy, as long as he's healthy, will be an All-Pro player every single year going forward. And I think he'll probably be that for the next 10 to 15 years, right? However long he decides to end up playing. But Brock Bowers, just wanted to share with you guys, is right now the leading tight end for the Pro Bowl. You guys can see some of these other players. You got Lamar and Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is kind of interesting if you guys ask me. You got Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Carson Steele, Kyle Juszczyk. Carson Steele's kind of interesting. I didn't know he's a fullback. I thought he was a running back. And keep in mind, these aren't the only players, right, that are going to end up in the Pro Bowl. These are just the top guys for the AFC and the NFC. So Brock Bowers is the top guy right now on the AFC. One of the guys that's kind of interesting on here for the AFC is Joe Alt. I'm surprised that Joe Alt is the top Pro Bowl votes right now for the AFC side. I guess it makes sense, right? Because Penei Sewell's in the NFC, as is Lane Johnson. He's in the NFC as well. But that's kind of surprising as well. I almost feel like we're at the point where, people post that Joe Alt's a great football player. If you guys remember, we had that Maxx Crosby story kind of go viral in the first week of the season. And I almost feel like people kind of just see things on social media, and then that's kind of what they think is facts. And it's kind of interesting because with Joe Alt, we've gotten some large influencers put it out there that this guy's, like a different type of player. And I don't see that with him yet. He's good, but I wouldn't say he's Penei Sewell good, right? They're not on the same level. Like, Penei Sewell's a different type of football player. And with Joel, I almost think he's a little overhyped at this point. But he is the leader right now on that side. A guy that I'm actually happy is also a leader, within this is going to be Dexter Lawrence. I think Dexter Lawrence is one of the most underrated defensive tackles in the NFL. He doesn't get the credit that I think he deserves. I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 guys at that position. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. Also, Maxx Crosby right now is number 6 for the AFC side. So that's kind of surprising, but I also understand sometimes it also comes down to wins, right? If your team's winning or not, obviously has a big impact on this. But let's wrap this video up. Let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft order. One of the interesting things with this is, so right now, the Raiders are the second team picking. This is not fixed in stone, obviously, right? We got 5 weeks of football left. A lot could change. But one of the things that's kind of interesting with this is, if the Raiders win one game, think about how far you can end up falling. You'll end up falling from the number 2 pick to the number 8 pick. Based off the strength of schedule, the Raiders have a higher strength of schedule than the Cleveland Browns. So if all these other teams end up losing and the Raiders win, that's how far back one pick can ultimately get us. And if the Raiders fall that far back, we're not going to get a quarterback, right? And I'm not saying the Raiders should tank this season. I'm not saying that at all. But, the Raiders got to really figure out that quarterback position as we kind of go into these final few weeks. Scott Turner has looked really, really good up to this point. I think we saw Scott Turner in the 2 weeks of Gardner Minshew show improvements. And then with Aiden O'Connell, it went a completely different step, right? Aiden O'Connell was delivering passes within the structure of the offense. Scott Turner was designing concepts, and Aiden O'Connell was delivering the pass. And I almost think if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, if you do win one game and you don't have a top 7 or 8 pick, you're going to have to consider going back into next season with Aiden O'Connell. And even then, right before the season ends, the Raiders got to realistically consider going forward with Aiden O'Connell. PFF dropped their top 250 prospects update literally just a couple days ago. And within that, they put out their quarterback rankings. And you guys can kind of see some of these rankings. Let me make this a little bit smaller. You guys can see some of their rankings. I mean, they have Jalen Milroe as their number 1 quarterback. They have Cam Ward 2, and they have Shedeur Sanders 3. Now, I know a lot of Raider fans want Shedeur Sanders, and I understand why you want him. But the fact that some of these guys, the thought process behind some of these guys, it's so massive, right? And I don't think people recognize that this year's class is not what it was last year, right? It's not even what it was the year prior to that. Right, when Bryce Young and CJ Stroud came out, those 2 guys were legit prospects. Like, you can watch Bryce Young's tape and say, this guy's going to be a good quarterback at the NFL level. CJ Stroud, you can look at his tape and say, this guy's going to be a good quarterback. In this class, we don't really have that guy. Like, I think a lot of people like Cam Ward. I think he's the guy that right now is probably going to be the number 1 pick for a lot of people because he's shown that he can play within the structure and he can kind of do all those things. But even then, like, people aren't 100% sold on any of these quarterbacks. This class right here has the potential to actually not be a good class, right? It could be kind of like that 2022 class where Kenny Pickett was the only first-round quarterback, and even then he busted out. People are saying this class could be very similar to that class. The only difference is some of these quarterbacks are a little bit more hyped than where they probably should go. Now, we don't know if Jalen Milroe is going to actually come out. Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, Quinn Ewers, these guys could easily all end up going back to school, and for some of them, it almost makes sense for them to go back to school. Miller Moss gave us an update earlier that he's transferring from USC, which means he's going back to school. He could have came out, but he's going to stay back 1 more year. He's going to be a graduate student, ultimately get that extra year, and he'll transfer to another team. So I think it's an interesting conversation the Raiders got to have. Like, does it make sense to go forward with one of these quarterbacks, or does it make more sense to say, let's roll with Aiden O'Connell and let's see if there's a better quarterback that comes out the following year? Now, some people are going to say get Arch Manning the following year. It's not guaranteed that Arch Manning comes out after 3 years either, right? None of that's guaranteed. We don't even know if he's going to be a good quarterback, truth be told. But the Raiders got to get a quarterback, and they got to figure it out. And I think drafting one makes sense, but do you want to take Shedeur Sanders with the 3rd overall pick, knowing that he's a 3rd-round prospect? Or Cam Ward, knowing he's a 4th-round prospect, right? And I'm not saying those guys are that, but do the Raiders really want to reach for a quarterback when you can get a guy like Ashton Genty or a guy like Travis Hunter or a guy like Will Johnson, who are going to be really, really good football players in the NFL? Does it make more sense to draft one of these guys over a quarterback that you don't really know? And again, I think we're going to find out a lot about Aiden O'Connell as we kind of end this season. And we're going to find out a lot about a lot of these guys, to be honest, you guys. Clavon Chasen had a really good game, and some people are saying, pay that man, right? I hesitate because I watched tape, and I've seen what this guy did up to that game. And, you know, it's good at certain times, but it's terrible at other times, right? Like, he doesn't have a real pass rush plan. Sometimes you just kind of get stuck with those offensive tackles. So I wouldn't pay any of these guys yet. I wouldn't commit to Aiden yet. I would wait and see how it kind of shapes out over the next, like, 5 weeks. Plus, we're going to get college football. They're like the playoffs, right? We're going to get the bowl games coming up. We're going to get the college football playoffs. We'll get to see guys. You know, I don't know if Alabama's going to be in the playoffs. We'll get Jalen Monroe if they are, right? We're probably not going to get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I think both teams. I think Miami actually ended up losing. So we might get Drew Aller, right? We might get some of these other guys though. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. The NFL draft is never guaranteed. We don't really know where we're going to pick. I think the best thing that could happen to the Raiders, and I said this last week and I'll say it again, is Aiden O'Connell and Scott Turner end up just winning 3 of the next 5 games. And both guys are really, really good at what they do. And the Raiders can go into next season knowing that they got 2 of what they ultimately needed, right? Which would be Scott Turner, the offensive coach / play caller, as well as Aiden O'Connell, who could then theoretically be the quarterback going into next season. So best case scenario is those 2 guys are actually good. And worst case scenario is they suck, and then we kind of just restart and go forward with the quarterback situation. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? That might not even be the worst case scenario. But let me know what you guys think, man. What do you guys think about the Maxx Crosby situation? Is it a big deal what he had to say? Let me know down in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.